Amy awoke in the darkness, heart pounding so fiercely she could feel it against her ribs. Her eyes darted across the room, trying to catch shapes hidden in the shadows. The night air carried a chill, slipping through the half-open window and raising goosebumps along her skin. She turned toward the glass, expecting to see her reflection blinking back. But the face there didn't move. It stayed perfectly still, staring back with eyes that seemed to breathe. Amy whispered, "Who's there?" Yet even her own voice seemed to echo from somewhere else. The face tilted, ever so slightly, like a puppet pulled by unseen strings. Fear gripped her chest, cold and absolute. Her trembling fingers reached toward the pane, desperate to prove it wasn't real. The face smiled then. Her smile. But it was wrong, slow, deliberate, and hungry. When morning came, it brought no peace. Amy sat on her bed, staring at the pale light spilling across the room. The window looked ordinary now, harmless, but she couldn't bring herself to open it. Her breath still caught when she remembered that smile. She tried to laugh it off, muttering that nightmares had a way of lingering. Yet, when she brushed her fingers across the glass, the cold burned. Her reflection blinked in perfect sync, but something behind those eyes felt aware. Amy whispered, "It's over." But deep down she knew the night hadn't left. It had just learned how to hide in daylight. The coffee machine hissed, releasing short bursts of steam that curled in the air. Amy stared at the kitchen window, eyes fixed on the reflection hovering in the glass. The room behind her was empty, yet she swore she saw movement beyond the shimmer. Her reflection blinked a fraction late. Her pulse stumbled, spilling coffee over hand. "It's just the light," she whispered, though no part of her believed it. The air grew heavy, pressing against her ribs, and she felt the weight of something unseen resting just over her shoulder. Her own face looked back at her, smiling faintly in the window. The afternoon air felt colder than it should. Amy walked down the quiet street, her gaze caught in every windowpane she passed. Each one held her reflection, all perfectly timed, all perfectly still, except one. In the window of a parked car, her mirrored self blinked half a second too late. She froze, heart hammering as wind rustled through bare branches. "No," she breathed, shaking her head, but the word felt thin and fragile. The silence pressed close around her. Behind the glass, her reflection's mouth twitched, not in sync with hers, forming a word she couldn't hear. Night returned with quiet vengeance. Amy sat upright in bed, lamp casting trembling shadows along the wall. Every sound in the house felt amplified, the creak of wood, the whisper of wind. She turned toward the window, and her stomach tightened. Her reflection stood there again, but this time its eyes remained open even when hers closed. She froze, unable to breathe. The reflection's lips began to move, shaping words she couldn't hear. "Stop," she whispered hoarsely, voice barely audible. The reflection lifted one pale hand and pressed it flat against the glass. Amy realized in that moment, it wasn't copying her anymore. Amy avoided the window that morning, choosing instead to lose herself in meaningless chores. The clink of dishes and hum of running water gave her mind something to hold on to. Yet every reflective surface caught her attention. The curve of a spoon, the shimmer of the faucet, the faint outline on the microwave door. Her own image flickered back at her, eyes a little too wide, lips a moment too slow. She told herself she was imagining it, but her stomach churned with unease. The sound of glass cracking behind her made her flinch, but nothing had broken. The silence that followed was heavier than before. "You're fine," she whispered. Yet the words felt borrowed, as if someone else was saying them inside her mind. By midday, Amy decided to visit her friend Lucas. Maybe company would make her feel sane again. The streets felt unfamiliar though. Every window she passed reflected her differently, some expressions not matching her own. When she reached his door, her hand hovered before knocking. What if she told him? Would he laugh? Would he see it too? Lucas greeted her with a grin, warm and confused by her pale face. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he joked. She forced a laugh, but her eyes drifted to the glass door behind him, and there, faintly, her reflection smiled before she did. Inside the house, Amy sat stiffly on Lucas's couch. She tried to speak but couldn't shape the words. The television's black screen across from her caught her reflection, and she saw herself look up before she did. She froze, heart stuttering. Lucas noticed her pale expression. "Amy? You okay?" he asked, leaning closer. She nodded quickly, forcing a smile, though sweat gathered on her palms. When she turned her gaze away, her reflection didn't move. The room seemed to tilt, her breath catching in her throat. Lucas's comforting words blurred into background noise. She whispered softly, "It's watching me." Lucas insisted she stay for dinner, trying to distract her with laughter and conversation. Yet Amy's eyes kept flicking toward the reflective window beside the dining table. The reflection inside it didn't match. Her other self wasn't eating, wasn't smiling. It only stared. Lucas reached across the table, touching her hand. "You need rest," he said kindly. Amy forced a nod, her throat dry. Behind him, the reflection blinked once, slowly, before tilting its head toward her. She almost screamed. Instead, she whispered, "You saw that, right?" But Lucas only looked puzzled, unaware of what was staring just behind his shoulder. When Amy finally returned home that night, she avoided every mirror. The air inside felt colder, heavier, as though her house itself was waiting. She turned off the lights, trying to drown her fear in darkness. But the moment her eyes adjusted, a faint shimmer glowed at the window. Her pulse quickened as she stepped closer, breath shallow. The face in the glass stood perfectly still, eyes wide, smile gentle and wrong. Amy whispered, "Why are you doing this?" Her reflection tilted its head and mouthed her question back, then smiled wider. In that instant, Amy realized something terrifying. It wasn't mimicking anymore. It was learning. The next morning, Amy stared at her reflection while brushing her teeth. For a moment, it seemed normal, until she looked away. Out of the corner of her eye, her reflection kept brushing long after she stopped. She froze, toothbrush slipping from her hand. The sound of it clattering against the sink echoed too long, like time had stretched around her. She dared to glance back. Her reflection stood still, smiling faintly, toothpaste running down its chin. Amy stepped back, her heartbeat rising in her ears. The mirror pulsed once, faintly, as though it breathed. "Stop it," she whispered, but her reflection tilted its head instead, curious, almost playful. Amy avoided mirrors all day, covering them with towels, shutting doors. Yet reflections found her in other ways, in the black screen of her phone, the shine of a spoon, even in the surface of her tea. Each one stared a heartbeat too long. Her hands trembled as she set the cup down, spilling some across the table. "You're not real," she muttered, though she felt its eyes on her still. Somewhere deep in her chest, panic coiled like a living thing. The reflection wasn't trapped anymore. It was reaching through every surface it could find. When Lucas called, Amy hesitated before answering. His voice sounded distant, hollow, as though echoing from a tunnel. "You okay?" he asked. She tried to answer but paused. In the phone screen's reflection, her lips were still moving even after she stopped talking. Her stomach turned cold. "Lucas," she whispered, "something's wrong with my reflection." Static filled the line, rising like a hiss. For a second, she thought she heard another voice beneath hers, whispering the same words, only slower. Then the call ended, leaving her in silence thick enough to choke on. That night, Amy dreamt of mirrors. Thousands of them, stretching endlessly, each holding a version of her that smiled, laughed, or cried. When she reached toward one, her reflection's hand broke through the glass. She woke, gasping, heart hammering against her ribs. The sound of shattering still rang in her ears. The moonlight spilling through the curtains glinted across shards of broken glass on her dresser. Her mirror had cracked. She hadn't touched it. From within the fractured surface, dozens of tiny versions of herself stared back, each one smiling. Amy swept the glass away in the morning, but her hands shook too hard to finish. Every shard seemed to whisper, faint echoes of her voice calling from nowhere. She dropped one piece and watched it spin before settling upright, reflecting her face upside down. The image blinked. Amy stumbled back, breath catching in her throat. Her reflection's smile turned calm, deliberate, as though it finally understood her. Somewhere inside she realized the truth. It wasn't following anymore. It was free, and it wanted to take her place. By now, Amy barely recognized her home. Curtains stayed drawn, mirrors covered with sheets. Yet no matter what she hid, reflections still appeared, in metal doorknobs, glossy photos, the surface of water in a glass. Each glimpse carried that same face, watching her every breath. The more she tried to escape, the closer it came. Then, late one night, the doorbell rang. She froze, heart leaping into her throat. Through the peephole, she saw an unfamiliar man, calm, patient, and silent. "Amy," he said softly, voice almost echoing. "I know what's happening to you." The words chilled her. She hadn't told anyone. Amy hesitated before opening the door. The stranger introduced himself as Elias, claiming to know about the one in the glass. His voice carried calm certainty, though his eyes looked haunted. "You've seen her, haven't you?" he asked. Amy nodded weakly, gripping the frame for balance. "It's not you," Elias said. "It's something bound to your reflection, a revenant spirit, feeding on your life." Amy recoiled. "That's impossible," she whispered. Elias stepped closer, his voice trembling slightly. "It isn't impossible. It happened to me." The weight of his confession pressed against the silence, and Amy felt her world tilt. Elias explained that long ago, a mirror in his childhood home began showing things it shouldn't. The figure inside looked like him, but older, crueler. One night his reflection stepped out, and his sister never woke again. "It's a curse," he said, eyes flickering toward Amy's covered mirrors. "They copy us until we weaken, then they take what's left." Amy felt nausea rise. "How do I stop it?" she asked. Elias shook his head. "You can't. You can only uncover why it found you." Her throat tightened. She didn't want to believe him, but part of her already knew. This thing wasn't random. It was personal. Amy rummaged through old boxes, desperate for answers. Among them, she found a photograph. Her childhood home, her mother smiling beside a large ornate mirror. Her pulse quickened. That mirror looked identical to the one she'd shattered. She called out to Elias, voice shaking. "It was my mother's," she said. He looked at the photo, expression tightening. "Then it chose your bloodline," he whispered. "This isn't the first time." Amy's hand trembled as she traced the image. Behind the printed figures, a faint blur of another face lingered in the glass. Her own, smiling faintly, even then. As night fell, the house grew restless. Shadows lengthened, bending toward the walls where covered mirrors trembled faintly. Elias paced, muttering incantations under his breath. Amy sat near the window, unable to look at her reflection, though she could feel it there, waiting. "It knows we're talking about it," Elias warned quietly. The lamp flickered. Amy's reflection appeared on the window pane, smiling before she could move. "Don't react," Elias said. But she couldn't help it. The reflection whispered soundlessly, mouthing words Amy didn't understand. Her chest constricted as it raised a finger, pointing at her. Amy woke to find her bedroom light on, though she didn't remember turning it. The air was colder, sharper, like winter had crept inside. Her reflection in the mirror across the room stood perfectly still while she moved, arms limp at its sides. She whispered Elias's name, but the sound died in her throat. The reflection's eyes flicked toward her, slow and deliberate. It smiled faintly, and her bedside lamp flickered in response. Panic filled her chest. The room seemed to breathe. Her phone buzzed suddenly, but when she picked it up, the call was from her own number. Elias hurried into her room after hearing her scream. She showed him the phone, trembling. The screen displayed a missed call labeled with her name. He frowned, taking it from her hand. "It's trying to cross," he muttered. "It's testing control." Amy backed away, eyes darting between him and the mirror. "It's already stronger than me," she whispered. The reflection blinked, slow, heavy, patient. Elias turned to cover the glass with cloth, but his movement froze midair. In the reflection, he was still moving. Amy's breath caught as she realized it wasn't only hers anymore. They fled to the living room, shutting every door behind them. Amy's chest heaved, the air thick with dust and dread. Elias pulled a book from his bag, flipping through worn pages filled with symbols. "There's a ritual," he said. "It must be done before midnight." Amy nodded shakily, though her hands trembled too hard to steady the candles. "What happens if we fail?" she asked. Elias didn't answer. Somewhere behind them, glass cracked, a faint sound like laughter buried in static. The mirror wasn't just watching anymore, it was walking closer. As Elias recited the incantation, the house began to hum. Shadows pulsed along the walls, shifting with the rhythm of his voice. Amy felt a sharp pain bloom behind her eyes, and for a moment she saw through the reflection's perspective, her own body trembling across from it. The reflection's lips moved in perfect sync, repeating the chant backward. Elias faltered, clutching his chest. "It's fighting back," he gasped. Amy screamed, grabbing his arm. "Finish it." But before he could, the lights burst out, plunging them into darkness. The last thing Amy saw was her reflection stepping forward. When the lights returned, Elias lay motionless. Amy crawled toward him, shaking, tears streaking her cheeks. His eyes were open, staring at nothing. "No," she whispered, voice breaking. Behind her, the mirror rippled. Her reflection stepped closer, no longer trapped, no longer bound. It smiled, reaching out with hands identical to hers. Amy tried to crawl away, but her limbs felt heavy, as though gravity had reversed. The reflection's fingertips brushed her cheek, cold, soft, final. Then the room fell silent, and only one Amy remained. The world felt wrong when Amy opened her eyes. The air was still, unnaturally heavy, and every sound in the house had been swallowed by silence. The walls seemed to pulse faintly, as if the house itself breathed. Elias's body lay where she had left it, eyes glazed in lifeless calm. But when she turned toward the window, she saw herself, standing outside, smiling softly through the glass. Her chest constricted, breath came shallow, trembling. "You're not me," she whispered. The reflection only tilted its head, mimicking compassion. Then it moved its hand, slowly raising its palm to the window. The gesture wasn't an invitation. It was a claim. Amy's hand rose against her will, trembling in perfect sync. Amy staggered backward, clutching her head as invisible force tugged at her movements. Her body fought to resist, but her limbs grew heavier, her reflection's control tightening like invisible strings. "Stop," she cried, though her voice cracked into sobs. The reflection pressed its hand harder against the glass, and every light in the room flickered. From behind her, the mirror began to hum, a low, resonant tone that crawled through her bones. Her vision blurred, splitting between two worlds, one real, one reflected. For a heartbeat, she saw herself in both places, watching from inside the glass, trapped. A scream ripped through her throat, echoing like breaking glass. The hum grew louder, deep and resonant, like 1,000 whispered voices overlapping. Amy's breath came in shallow bursts, her knees hitting the floor as unseen hands seemed to drag her toward the mirror. The surface rippled like water, distorting her reflection into something monstrous. Its eyes gleamed with intelligence, lips curling into a mocking grin. "You can't take me," Amy gasped. But the figure only stepped closer, its smile stretching too wide. Behind her, Elias's book lay open, pages fluttering in a phantom wind. The words on the page began to burn faintly, symbols glowing white-hot. Amy reached toward them, desperate, as the reflection pressed its face against the glass. The room trembled violently. Books fell, curtains flared, and a sudden rush of wind spiraled inward. Amy screamed as her reflection began to push through the glass. First its hands, then its face, each feature dripping like liquid silver before reforming. It stood beside her now, real and solid, wearing her face but twisted, eyes sharper, smile crueler. Amy crawled backward, her palms scraping the floor. "You don't belong here," she whispered. The reflection stepped closer, its voice echoing inside her head. "But I do. I always did." The two versions of her circled each other, shadow and light flickering across their mirrored faces. They faced each other, two identical beings, one shaking with fear, the other calm and certain. "Why me?" Amy asked, tears streaking down her cheeks. The reflection smiled. "Because you look too long," it said softly, voice eerily like hers. The mirror behind them pulsed again, hungry and alive. Amy lunged, grabbing its wrists, both struggling as glass shards rained around them. Pain lanced through her palms, but she didn't let go. "I won't let you," she screamed. The reflection laughed, not cruelly, but with pity. "You already did." Light exploded from the mirror, swallowing the room in white brilliance. When it faded, only one figure remained, breathing, trembling and unsure which side of the glass she was on. Silence returned like a suffocating fog. The light faded slowly, leaving behind the faint hum of electricity and the soft drip of something unseen. Amy stood in the center of the room, surrounded by fragments of broken glass, her reflection scattered across every surface. The air smelled faintly of iron and smoke. She stared at her trembling hands, unsure if they were hers anymore. Everything around her felt slightly off. The walls seemed closer, the air heavier. "It's over," she whispered, but even her own voice felt wrong, hollow, as if spoken from somewhere distant. In the reflection of a shard near her feet, another pair of eyes blinked, a heartbeat out of sync. Amy stumbled toward the hallway, each step heavier than the last. Her reflection followed in the shards lining the floor, each one moving slightly delayed. Her heartbeat echoed through the empty house, uneven and frantic. In the mirror by the stairs she caught her face, tired, blank, unfamiliar. "Who am I?" she whispered, fingers grazing the cracked surface. The reflection didn't answer, but a faint smile crept along its lips. She turned away quickly, eyes stinging. The floorboards creaked beneath her weight, yet a second set of footsteps followed, soft, perfectly timed, coming from nowhere. The house no longer felt like her own. Every picture frame, every darkened window seemed to breathe with quiet anticipation. Amy reached for the front door, hands shaking. But as her fingers touched the knob, a whisper brushed against her ear, her own voice gentle, pleading, "Stay." She froze. In the window beside the door, her reflection appeared again, watching with calm serenity. It raised a hand slowly, pressing against the glass. Her chest tightened. The reflection mouthed something soundless, but the meaning echoed in her mind. "You're already home." She stepped back, trembling, the walls seeming to pulse around her. Desperation overtook fear. Amy ran through the house, covering every reflective surface with sheets, blankets, anything she could find. But the reflections kept returning. In the polished wood, in the puddles of water that gathered on the floor, even in the dark of her pupils. "Leave me alone," she cried, but her voice bounced back, multiplied, whispering from all sides. She collapsed against the wall, clutching her head. The whispers turned into soft laughter, her own. Somewhere within that sound, a single voice emerged, clear and cold. "There's no leaving. Only remembering." The air thickened. The lights dimmed until she could see nothing but her reflection's eyes glowing faintly in the dark. By dawn, quiet settled again. The sky outside turned pale gray, casting cold light into the room. Amy stood before the last unbroken mirror, the one she had once used every morning without thought. Her reflection stood opposite, expression soft, almost kind. "Who are you?" she asked. The reflection tilted its head, eyes gleaming with something ancient and knowing. Then, slowly, It smiled, the same smile she had seen that first night. Amy reached forward, fingertips grazing the glass. It felt warm. The reflection's hand met hers, fingers aligning perfectly. In that moment, something shifted. A faint ripple spread outward, and Amy's face, the real one, began to fade from view. Outside, in the windowpane, a new reflection blinked awake.